Hi everybody. I suck at this. Hey everybody, welcome to the first video for our Poca. What? Hi everybody, welcome to our first video for the Poca sweater knit along. So I'll be making videos for you guys every time I have something to share as we go along in the knit along, and this is the first one, and there's a few things that I'm going to cover in this video. I'm going to cover working gauge for Poca, talk about choosing yarn a little bit, talk about where you can find information for working on Poca, talk about choosing your size for knitting Poca, and then a few other tips and tricks just to make things easy, okay? So first thing you should know is that we have threads set up in my Ravelry group, and the link to that is nelkadesigns.com/Ravelry. I'll put that in the notes so you can get to it easily. In my Ravelry group, there's going to be a thread where people are already chatting about choosing yarn and thinking about size that they want to knit. And I'm also going to set up a tips and tricks thread. And in that thread, that will be a locked thread that I will take pieces of information that are pretty important that come up in the conversation in the main threads, so that you know where to find things quickly if you have a question. And that's my job along with the moderators, is to try to distill out information. Like if I do a post that explains how to make the sleeve longer, for example, I'll put that into the locked tips and tricks thread, so it's really easy for you to find. So go check that if you have any questions. I'll get that set up really soon. The first thing that you have to do when you go to knit a sweater is clearly just grab some yarn and cast on and start knitting. That is totally not what you do. The first thing you do when you're thinking about starting a sweater is you sit down, and you guys who've taken classes with me before know what I'm about to say. You read your pattern. In fact, maybe you read your pattern twice. But I know, crazy. But what you really do is make sure you read the first few pages, like page 1, page 2, page 3, that are going to have all of the basic tips and tricks and designer notes, everything you need to know to help you have success when you go to cast on. So definitely start out by doing that with your pattern. This knit along is not like a traditional mystery knit along. You have the whole pattern all at once. You have everything there, so you can work at your own pace. But I'll be kind of releasing information in segments so that if you follow along with me, you will end up with the sweater by the middle of October. And I've set up a pace that's not super crazy, so I'm sure that everybody's going to be able to, if you stick to my schedule, you will have a sweater mid-October. It is okay if it takes you a little longer, or if you decide to plow ahead and do things more quickly. What I'll do each time I release a video is give you guys a goal at the end of the video, and I'll set up a contest thread for you to post about that goal. So the goal after this video is going to be setting up your project page and choosing a size and working your gauge. And I will tell you about that at the end of this video, okay? So you've read your pattern, and you read a little bit about the construction for Poca, but you want me to tell you more about it. So let me do that. Poca uses my Novus Construction. The Novus Construction is a construction I came up with a few years ago after I did a mystery knit along that was built with 2 triangles with a center panel. It was called Kinetic. And I came up with a way of working the center panel on the shawl so that when you worked the center panel, you were working back and forth and eating up stitches from each of the triangles on the shawl. And after I did that, I was like, I think you could build a whole sweater around this construction. So I've done that, and I have probably 10 or 11 sweaters now that use this construction. And Poca is a little different in that it has dolman sleeves, and all of the other cardigans in the Novus that use the Novus Construction have a straight sleeve that goes straight into the side panel. And you can see when I hold up my arm with Poca that there's a dolman shaping that comes down and into the side seam. So what happens is you cast on over here for your sleeve, and you're working up straight, and you're actually doing some increasing on the sleeve already, And when you get to like right about here, you have stitches that are provisionally cast on for the front and the back of your sweater. And you begin to slowly work back and across those stitches, working just a few of them at the time as you continue to work across the shoulder stitches until your shoulder is, I guess it's not quite your shoulder, but the upper part of the sleeve is knit. And then you work across the rest of those stitches that you have cast on. At the same time, you're casting on stitches for your integrated pocket. And in the next video I do, we're gonna talk more about this step. So if you're confused, don't worry. I'm gonna go over it in detail and show you exactly how that works. You then work across the shoulder, and then you split for the neckline, and your back stitches get put on a holder and your front stitches get shaping right here, because you need a little bit of shaping for the ladies, right? And then you put all of these stitches right here on a holder. At the same time, you're working that integrated pocket. Now you go ahead and do the same thing on the left hand side of the sweater. The pattern doesn't say reverse shaping. Don't worry, it's all written out for you what you're doing on the left side of the sweater. And then you end up with these two halves. And you take those two halves and then you work, I'm turning around, sorry, this is kind of funny. You are then working a seed stitch panel up the back that connects the right half and the left half of the sweater together as you're working up. You basically have like a needle down here and you cast on stitches to it, and then you're working across those stitches and doing a slip one, knit one, pass slip stitch over and binding off a stitch here, and then doing the same thing over here on the side and working back and across, going up like that, up the back of the sweater. And then when you get up to the top and all of those stitches are worked off, you just put those stitches on a holder from that little back panel. And then you basically do the same thing on the side panel, and at the same time you're folding up the pocket to integrate it in. And then you do a little attached I-cord edging around the neckline, and you're done. If that sounded like a lot of words to you, I did do a blog post with diagrams that explains exactly what I just said. So I'll link to that blog post and you can go read about that, and I think you'll understand the construction a little further. Definitely helps to have your brain wrapped around this, but it's also okay for you to just blindly trust me and know that the sweater is going to work out as written if you follow my directions and just trust them and do what they say. There's some people who've had to do that, and in the end they have a sweater and they're super psyched, and there's just like a moment of faith. I know that many people have knit the Novus sweaters successfully, and I know that you can do it too. Okay, so that's the construction for Poca. The next thing you need to think about is gauge. And what's kind of cool about working gauge for Poca is that you can cast on for a sleeve, and your sleeve can become your gauge swatch. So actually, before I want to talk to you about gauge and what is important about gauge, I want to talk to you about choosing a size for your body. So what you want to do for that is look at page 1 and page 2 of your pattern and measure your bust at its full bust measurement, not up here at your high bust and not down here around your rib cage. So right up at your full bust. Hopefully YouTube won't take me down for saying bust 5 times in a row. You're going to measure yourself right around there, and that is going to be your 2 fit measurement. Poca is designed with 6 inches of positive ease. You can see there's a lot of ease in here. I can fit long sleeve shirt under here that's kind of loose and baggy. That's going to be great if it ever finally gets cold out and I need some layers on. So there's a little bit of flexibility in the fit with Poca, but choose the size that is closest to your 2 fit measurement. In the Ravelry group, if you have a question because your full bust measurement is in between 2 sizes, go ahead and ask, and I'll start answering people and helping them choose a size, and that will help you all decide what size you're going to make. So definitely don't feel shy about asking questions. I'm happy to help you make sure that you're making the right size for you. Keep in mind that this pattern does have 6 inches of ease. So going up might end up adding like 8 or 10 inches of ease, which might be much more than you want. And I find sometimes with sweaters that trying to think of like the lovely way. This is how I said it at SSK last weekend, that sometimes we have this like overinflated sense of self, right? Like we see ourselves as bigger than we are. So you tend to like go up a size because you're worried about something being tight. And in fact, you end up with a sweater that your body is completely hidden in, and then it doesn't feel comfortable to be wearing. So I would, if you're choosing between up and down for choosing a size, I would choose down instead of choosing up. I think you're going to be happier with the fit overall. So once you choose a size, you can cast on for a sleeve to do your gauge swatch, which is really cool because if you actually get gauge, then you're already off and running with your sleeve. But clearly you need to know what size you're making first. And then you're going to follow the instructions for the sleeve that you're making. I'm actually working on a little mini sleeve right now because I'm going to show you how to do all the steps with like a little, I'm going to end up making a little miniature Poca sweater for somebody's Christmas tree at the end of this. So this is a little mini sleeve. You can see I'm doing the increases on the outside. You want to work your sleeve till it's at least about 6 inches tall. And then take that sleeve and put it onto some scrap yarn and soak it in some warm water with some wool wash, just like you would block your sweater when it's done. That's how you should treat your swatch. Let it soak for about 10 minutes, squeeze out all of the excess water, and then lay it down to dry flat without stretching it out. Just like lay it down smoothly the way you would with your finished sweater. And then right when it's dry or almost dry, and this is a pretty important step, take that swatch and take some weight. I like to use these like little wonder clips that are used for seaming or quilting, and hang those on the side of the sleeve, not on the top or the bottom. And then hang that off of like a countertop or your ironing board. You might be able to pin it to your ironing board and let it hang overnight. What you're doing when you do that is simulating the weight of the yarn off of your shoulders. This is really important because your row gauge is going this way and your stitch gauge is going this way. So row gauge is actually dictating the circumference of your polka, and stitch gauge is dictating the length of your polka. So it's pretty important when you lay those weights. That's just like your sweater hanging off of your shoulder point, like all the weight of all of that yarn, which is going to change your gauge just a tiny bit. So let it hang overnight like this. And then when it's done, I still have mine on my needles, but I can just like rip my needle off for you. Then take your swatch. This is a super important step. Bat it around just like a kitten would bat around your yarn. And then lay it down flat, and without stretching it, measure your stitch gauge and your row gauge. Row gauge is more important than stitch gauge. It is really easy to add or subtract some stitches to the length of your sweater if you end up with a stitch gauge that's a little bit off. But if your row gauge is off, it's going to end up affecting a huge amount of the sweater, from the length of the sleeve to the width of the shoulder to the circumference of the front to the back, everything. So it's a lot easier to make changes based on your length than it is to make changes based on the width. So this might be the first time you've knit a sweater where row gauge is more important than stitch gauge. If you were in the room with me, I might make you repeat that along with me, but you're not. So you can just say it in your head to yourself. That is written out in the pattern notes, this whole how to do a gauge swatch. I just went into it a little more deeply for you. The other thing you're going to see that you need to know before you work the sleeve is you need to know how to do a reverse yarn over. And I've made a separate tutorial for that because I didn't want to embed it into this video. So that tutorial you can go watch, and I'll give you guys a link to that so you have all of that. Oh, there's one more thing that I wanted to tell you about. One thing that you're going to think about now is if you are somebody who wants the sleeve to be longer, right now I've designed it to end right about the middle of your forearm, so halfway in between your elbow and your wrist. If you want to make your sleeve longer, you're going to want to add in just straight stockinette stitch rows after the seed stitch before you jump into the shaping of the sleeve. So what you'll do is add on however many inches that is. So you'll look at your row gauge and per inch, and then you'll say I want to add 3 inches, and you'll do the math and add that many more rows before you go into the shaping, and then just make a note of what you added so that you do that on the other side, and then remember to take care of that and pick up extra stitches when you're going to do the side panel. And you can ask me about that. I think I'll do in the tips and tricks thread, I think I'll do something that's like, so you want to make your sleeve longer, here's what you have to think about, and then you'll have that resource there, okay? Definitely ask questions as you guys come up with things. I can cover them in a video, and I can make sure I get them into the tips and tricks thread. I am super excited to be doing a sweater knit along with you. This is going to be really fun and a new pursuit for us all. Thanks. I'll see you in the forums.